The story opens beneath the glare of studio lights, bright and unrelenting, bouncing harshly off polished cameras and the iconic set of Judge Judy's televised courtroom. The audience sits expectantly, millions more watching at home, ready for another session of sharp wit and uncompromising authority from the woman who built her reputation on quick judgments and cutting remarks. For decades she has reigned in that chair, untouchable, feared for her tongue more than any gavel. Yet across from her, seated with quiet composure, is not a nervous defendant or argumentative lawyer, but President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso, a young leader whose very presence is a disruption to the usual rhythm of her show. He sits with a stillness that unsettles, his plain suit and calm demeanor standing in stark contrast to Judy's commanding posture. The narration frames their juxtaposition, an aging titan of American television accustomed to mocking arrogance away, and a young African leader carrying himself not with bravado, but with dignity. She begins as expected, her voice sharp, probing about justice, values, and leadership, searching for openings where his answers might falter. He responds evenly, not with rehearsed slogans, but with a simplicity that carries weight, crediting his faith as the well from which his strength to endure is drawn. He speaks of belief in God, his words steady, unflinching, almost disarming in their lack of political polish. For a brief second the audience holds its breath, unused to such honesty in a space designed for confrontation. Then Judy leans forward, her smirk widening as if she has found her moment. Her tone slices through the air with the precision of a blade. "Oh, faith again. Don't you think relying on an invisible figure is childish?" The words are calculated, delivered with the familiar mixture of mockery and confidence that has silenced countless guests before. Nervous laughter ripples through the studio audience, a sound that feels more like reflex than amusement. Narration captures the shift, the laughter hollow, uncertain, a mask for discomfort. Millions watching in living rooms across the world stiffen at once, sensing the insult for what it is, not just an attack on a man across the table but on something far larger, something sacred. Ibrahim lowers his eyes, the camera catching the quiet movement. To some, it looks like defeat, but the narration makes clear that it is not surrender but reflection, a pause before a storm. His fingers rest lightly on the table, his breath slow and controlled, his silence more powerful than any immediate retort could be. Then he raises his head, and his calm gaze unsettles the balance of the room. The audience shifts uneasily. Judy, used to dominance, waits for fluster or apology. Instead, the young president speaks with a voice softened by compassion yet sharpened by truth. "Judge," he says, his words dropping like thunder into the hollow air. "When you mock faith, you mock the millions who survive by it." The sentence cuts clean through the room. The audience freezes. A man coughs nervously. Someone in the front row lowers their eyes. The laughter that moments ago seemed safe now feels shameful. Judy blinks, her armor showing its first crack, her confidence disrupted by the weight of words she cannot easily dismiss. The narration magnifies the moment. The cameras zoom closer, capturing the faint tremor in her lips, the flicker of recognition behind her eyes. Across the globe, screens glow brighter as people lean closer, sensing that something irreversible is about to unfold. That the stage designed for entertainment has been transformed into a battleground of dignity and truth. The words linger in. The charged silence and narration carries them outward, their weight pressing against the room with a force greater than Judy's usual authority could command. The camera catches the faint flicker in her eyes, but before her expression can harden again, narration shifts backward, layering context, showing why these words strike deeper than courtroom banter. Images rise in memory and imagination. Widows, in forgotten villages clutching rosaries as the night shakes with gunfire. Soldiers whispering short prayers before battle knowing it may be their last breath. Children kneeling in dimly lit huts, asking for food, for safety, for a tomorrow. These flashbacks frame Ibrahim's words not as defense, but as testimony, carried from countless voices who have never been given a microphone. The studio audience shifts uneasily, their role as passive spectators suddenly dissolving into witnesses of something larger. A journalist near the back leans toward his colleague, whispering sharply, "This isn't debate anymore. This is something else. The words hang between them as if even speaking aloud what they are seeing is too much. In the front row, an audience member wipes a tear quickly, embarrassed, as though feeling something here was inappropriate in a place designed for sharp retorts and cutting laughter. But the emotion is undeniable. Judy, for the first time, falters. She straightens her notes, her fingers fumbling for order, but the paper crinkles too loudly, betraying nerves. Ibrahim's voice does not rise in anger. It steadies, stronger in its calm. Faith is not weakness. It is courage. The words land cleanly, and narration lingers on their weight, emphasizing the imbalance in the room. An American icon with decades of influence, mocking as if to diminish. Yet across from her sits a man from a country often dismissed as small, irrelevant, powerless. And yet in this moment, it is his dignity overturning mockery, his restraint dismantling arrogance. Across the globe, screens begin to glow brighter. In London, a church choir halts mid-hymn, listening intently as the broadcast streams on a small television wheeled into rehearsal. In Lagos, an imam quotes his words mid-sermon, reminding his congregation that faith has always been the armor of the weak against oppression. In New York, strangers in a coffee shop pause their scrolling, transfixed, as his calm face fills their phones. Narration contrasts these ripples of reverence with sharp opposition. Commentators online sneer, "This is theater, calculated to manipulate emotions." A news anchor frowns behind his desk, debating whether faith should ever bleed into governance. The clash of voices magnifies the stakes, but the heartbeat of the moment remains with the man who refuses to flinch. Judy, shifting again in her seat, is no longer composed. The audience sees it. The camera magnifies it. Memories she buried claw their way back to the surface. Nights she sat alone as her father lay ill, her sharpness stripped away by fear, whispering silent prayers in the dark that she swore later never to admit. Narration presses into this wound, exposing the bitterness that calcified into mockery, the shield she built to never again be that vulnerable. Yet Ibrahim's words pierce it with unsettling clarity, and the cracks begin to show. Her lips tighten, but her eyes betray her, a flicker of recognition flashing through the armor she has worn for decades. The studio grows heavier, breaths shallower, as the balance tips away from entertainment and toward revelation. The section ends with a sting too subtle to ignore. A tear rolling down the cheek of an audience member catches the studio light like a prism, refracting across millions of screens. And for the first time in her career, Judy lowers her gaze to her notes, unable, perhaps unwilling, to meet the eyes of the man she tried to diminish. The camera pushes closer, the air in the studio thick as if every breath waits on Ibrahim's next word. Narration slows, capturing the image of him seated in stillness, posture unshaken, eyes steady, while across from him Judge Judy falters, her legendary confidence beginning to collapse under a weight she cannot deflect. He leans forward slightly, not with aggression but with the gravity of truth, his voice soft yet piercing enough to echo in every heart that listens. If faith is weakness, why do the strongest I've known cling to it in their darkest hours? The words land with the force of a confession more than an argument, and the room freezes. Journalists who came ready to dissect talking points cannot lift their pens, their notes left half-written, as if language itself feels inadequate. The audience is still, their silence louder than applause, eyes transfixed on a young leader daring to question not her authority, but her certainty. Judy, whose career has been built on never yielding, swallows hard, her throat tightening in, a rare betrayal of nerves. The cameras catch it, magnifying what her silence cannot hide. In the front row, a man presses a tissue to his eyes, the shimmer of tears catching the studio lights, his shoulders trembling as though Ibrahim's words unlocked something long buried. Ibrahim does not strike, he does not mock. Instead, his voice steadies with a gentleness that cuts sharper than scorn. I don't blame you, Judge. Many have been hurt in ways that make them doubt. But what I carry is survival, not fantasy. His tone is not one of victory, but of invitation, and the narration lingers on the paradox. How compassion dismantles walls pride cannot. The broadcast carries this tension across the globe in real time, social media igniting with captions. Faith is courage. Strength in silence. Respect Traore. Screens light up in homes, schools, churches, mosques, and offices, the simple image of an African leader holding his ground through humility resonating louder than speeches of power. Judy's face tightens, pride collapsing before millions. For the first time in her career, her eyes drop to the table, unable to hold the weight of his gaze. The cameras do not look away. They immortalize the moment a giant bends, not by force, but by dignity. The crescendo builds as Ibrahim raises his hand slightly, his voice calm but commanding, carrying not just to Judy, but to every unseen viewer beyond the screen. If you strip faith from people, what will you give them instead when the world abandons them? The silence that follows is unbearable, heavy with the question no one dares answer. The narration widens, describing the stillness in the studio, the collective inhale of a world leaning closer. Online, hashtags surge like wildfire. Faith is courage. Respect, Traore. Even judges bend. The power dynamics invert. No longer is Judy the unquestioned arbiter of truth, but a human face caught trembling before the force of conviction. She blinks rapidly, moisture clouding eyes that once burned with sharpness. Her hand grips her pen, but it cannot disguise the quiver in her lips. Then, almost involuntarily, the words escape her in a trembling whisper, audible enough for cameras to capture. Why do his words feel meant for me? The narration lingers on that confession, the unplanned admission of a woman undone not by ridicule but by truth spoken gently. The audience exhales, the moment sealed. The climax holds on Judy's tear-bright eyes as the world watches the unthinkable. The judge who mocked faith now disarmed by it. After the broadcast, the story dissolves into aftermath, the frenzy of headlines replaced by quiet reckonings behind closed doors. Judy sits alone in her dressing room, the glare of vanity bulbs softening around her as she replays the clip on a tablet. Each time Ibrahim's calm eyes meet hers on screen, her chest tightens. Each time his words echo. Faith is not weakness. It is courage. She remembers nights of her father's illness, nights when she whispered desperate prayers into her pillow, hoping for mercy, promising herself she would never again expose such frailty. Narration lingers on her face as the tear she has fought for decades finally slips down her cheek. Her lips tremble as she whispers into the empty room. God, are you still there? The vulnerability sounds foreign to her own ears. Across the world, the same clip sparks transformations small and large. In a Burkina Faso classroom, a boy turns to his teacher, whispering shyly, "So we should never be ashamed to pray?" His teacher nods through tears, her voice breaking as she answers, "Never." In Detroit, a weary father sits by his daughter's hospital bed, pen in hand, writing a letter to Ibrahim. "I prayed again last night for the first time in years. I had forgotten what it felt like to believe." Narration swells as images flash across continents. Vigils in Paris with candles held against the night sky. Subway choirs in New York breaking into hymns with strangers joining in. Hashtags scrolling into songs. Faith, once mocked on live television, has become a global echo of resilience. Meanwhile, Judy, shaken beyond pride, does the unthinkable. She requests a live broadcast, one not edited, not scripted, to address her own words. Millions tune in expecting fire, expecting the iron tongue that for decades cut through arrogance with sharper arrogance. Instead, her voice trembles as she grips the podium, the image of her vulnerability carried to every living room. "Yesterday I mocked faith. I was wrong. Faith is strength. Mr. President, thank you for reminding me." Gasps ripple worldwide. Some applaud instantly, others sit stunned, processing the humility of a woman who had never admitted defeat. Narration presses the irony with poetic justice. The judge whose career was built on belittling now humbles herself because a young African president answered her scorn with dignity. Ibrahim, watching from afar, responds with the same calm restraint that made the moment unforgettable. In a quiet press statement, he speaks gently. "I forgave her the moment she spoke. Anger cannot build the future. Only love can." His words ripple with more force than anger ever could, cementing the truth that strength is not measured in retaliation, but in grace. The final scene closes cinematically with Judy and Ibrahim meeting privately weeks later, cameras waiting outside the room. When they emerge, their eyes are red, their hands clasped. It is not spectacle but sincerity, an image of reconciliation broadcast across the globe. Narration holds on the sight of two figures once set against each other, now united by tears and humility. The closing line strikes with finality, sealing the transformation not just of individuals, but of all who watched. What the world witnessed was not a clash, but proof that truth spoken with love can melt even the hardest hearts.